Welcome to Fear Less, Do More, the podcast where we dive into the minds of some extraordinary and fearless businesses and people who are challenging the status quo and who are helping to change the world of business around us. I'm your host, Gill Hunter. I'm the managing partner at Square One Law. On each episode, I'll be chatting to innovators, change makers and trailblazers, where we explore the unique journeys of our guests. We'll delve into the fears they've faced, the setbacks they've overcome, the lessons they've learned along the way. We'll uncover the secrets behind their resilience, and we'll find out what motivates them to keep going, even in the face of adversity. We'll also have a few laughs along the way too. My guests are all leaders who relentlessly pursue their passions, not only to create a better tomorrow, but who inspire us to push our own boundaries, those who fear less and do more. Welcome to today's episode of our podcast. I'm really excited about today because one of my all-time LinkedIn heroines is down the line, and that's Joanne Lockwood. So, Joanne, welcome, and thank you for appearing on our podcast today.
Thanks, Jill. That's a bit of a daunting intro. I mean, no pressure, no pressure here. So,
well, we'll come on to why I admire you so much shortly. But you describe yourself, Joanne, as an inclusive cultural expert. That's a unique job title. What does it mean?
For me, we use all these acronyms: DEI, DEIB, DEIJ, justice, belonging, inclusion, equity, equality, diversity. And I always think that what we're doing is we're not really focusing on the output. So for me, the output is positive people experiences. And I believe that experience starts as culture first. You know, if you're a culture first organization, everything else will follow. So rather than looking at diversity as your primary objective, if we look at culture, so what we're trying to do is create an environment where people feel able to bring their whole self to work, that psychological safety, that support, that inclusive leadership culture, if you like, where people feel they're getting the support they need, mental health, whatever it may be. If we get the culture right, then we feel that sense of belonging. Belonging happens where my values and the organization's values align, and we feel that sense of common purpose. So I feel this is my place. And then if we feel that sense of belonging, I would like to think inclusion is inherent in that environment. If inclusion is inherent in the right culture, then diversity is likely to happen because we're doing the right things. We're creating ourselves as an attractive employer of choice. I've employer value proposition, all these buzzwords, there are brand values, they align. So when we're recruiting people, we're recruiting people into an organization that they know that they can trust. So that's why I always think in culture first. So when I talk about being an inclusive culture expert, I really do focus on positive people experiences and culture, whether that's in the talent acquisition process, so the candidate experience, the employee life cycle experience from pre-hire to retire, or whether that's stakeholders, customers, whoever we deal with. And I think that's, if we aim at that positive people experience throughout the organization, top to bottom, that should be the best starting point, rather than focusing on diversity or trying to hire more diverse people, if you like.
Yeah, no, that totally resonates with me because culture is something. It's so nebulous. You can't grasp what it is. But to talk about positive people, that sort of encapsulates everything. And it comes from a really healthy place of looking at the positives rather than focusing on all the things that you haven't done and that you haven't got right. If you focus on the positives, I always feel that you get much more out of that positive affirmation rather than constantly doing yourself down about what you haven't got right and what you haven't got.
Yeah, for sure. And whilst culture sounds nebulous, you can measure it. You can look at average tenure of employees. Are people staying? Are good people being promoted from various different demographics and backgrounds? Are we seeing a diversity of lived experience and of identity within the organization at different levels? So if we are seeing, and I'm talking about here a trend, we're trending upwards in those things. So we're tending to see growth in those areas, then that would indicate to me that we're growing our culture in a positive way. So whilst it may be difficult to measure it precisely, we can look for trends, reduction in complaints, understanding our customers better, less employee tribunals going on in our organisation. And I would hope as an legal firm you don't have employee tribunals going on. But that kind of that's how we're measuring it. It may seem a bit nebulous, but employee engagement surveys, candidate experience surveys, customer experience surveys, all of these things will touch on the culture we have. And if we're delivering a positive experience to our people, that will roll through to all the other aspects of our business.
Yeah, you touched on something there. I think that a lot of people who are in the inclusion space struggle with, particularly in larger corporates, where it's seen as the realm of HR. It's seen as something that HR need to sort out. How do HR teams and other people who are active in inclusion, how do they get engagement at board level?
Yeah, you're right. It is kind of an HR, it's a people thing, isn't it? You know, whether you're a chief people officer or chief HR officer, whether you think yourself as a people champion, it is tend to be an HR function. But as I said earlier, the people experience goes through talent acquisition, and talent acquisition and hiring isn't always an HR function in some businesses, and also customer service and brand and marketing are who we are is not always an HR function either. So I believe that if you like the EDI or the D&I ownership should be at board level and maybe not delegated down to HR or the HR team. I'm also a great believer that board should own and drive strategy. And I believe that the EDI, the D&I strategy should be owned at board level. I always get frustrated when I see heads of or even team leads trying to drive strategy and persuade the board. The board should be owning the strategy. As a board, that's their role, to own and drive strategy, and then to implement and delegate operational activities to teams, to a director, to a head of, to action that. So the board should most definitely own their why. Why does it matter? Why does an organisation want to focus on D&I initiatives? And there's three sort of sides to that. There's compliance, it's the law, we've got to get it right, the Equality Act 2010, Public Service Equality Duty, various other acts and laws, but also there's the doing the right thing, treating our people with dignity and respect, because I want to be treated in that way, and I'm sure you and everybody else does who's listening. And then the third element is the business case, this everlasting nemesis of getting funding, getting buy-in, if you like. The board, they want a business case, they want to justify. And I know many EDI consultants get frustrated of having to result to the business case. But I'm a great believer, if you get the people side right, this emotional people, get it right for people first, then you will end up with, so I use this buzzword again, positive people experiences. You will end up having a positive impact on your bottom line and your business. You'll reduce turnover of staff. If you reduce turnover of staff, you'll reduce your hiring costs, your onboarding costs, your training costs, your empty seat costs. Even if you just extend the tenure by 6 months to a year of average, because we do want healthy turnover of our people. We want to grow and develop them. We don't want to hang on to them forever. We'll get more discretionary effort. People will want to show up. They'll want to be positive. They'll work as a team, and they'll start supporting each other. So all of these things come, you feel like, when the culture is right, and the magic starts to happen with that sense of belongingness.
And one of those things that you talk about is conscious inclusion. I don't know what that is. Can you explain to me what conscious inclusion is?
Well, in simple terms, if you're not consciously including people, then by definition, you are effectively unconsciously excluding someone because you're not thinking about them. So conscious inclusion is really a mindset around thinking about people holistically and all people. So you start to question yourself, who aren't I considering? Who maybe isn't included in this decision? It goes beyond equality impact assessments. I mean, public sector bodies use equality impact assessment. So what's the impact of this change? What's the impact of this decision? And it's a bit like that. It's putting that consciousness around our thoughts. And if we're not careful, what happens is we unconsciously ignore, unconsciously exclude. So our biases, our preferences, some of our biases are conscious, some of them are unconscious, or our processes, they just may not be designed for people who are not like me. The default, whoever's the default incumbent, we don't necessarily recognize that our hiring processes are as inclusive as they could be, but they seem to work. who don't they work for? So it's almost having that question in your head: who doesn't this work for? How is that impacting this person? What can I do differently? Reframing and saying, hang on, rather than start with a no, let's start with a yes. What would that look like? So being hyper conscious around your own biases and the biases in your systems, and who is potentially being excluded without thought. So that's really what conscious inclusion is designing inclusion into the process.
And as a relatively small business that I run, it's almost impossible. Well, it is impossible to get diversity across the piece. With representation from all of the different areas of different protected characteristics, as well as all the other things that you would want to see in your business. So we spend a lot of time trying to think about, well, how can we engage with different communities and find out what would include them, because I'm a big believer that not about us without us. So don't make decisions on behalf of other people who you don't represent as to what you could do. What advice would you give a business like mine who's trying to do the right thing but perhaps doesn't have that access to all the different voices?
Well, firstly, I think you've nailed it on the head. You recognise that you need to hear those voices. So I think businesses need to recognize that they have to hear voices from people that aren't in the room, maybe that are not covered, because your customers, the people you serve, the people who pay your wages, if you like, they come from different backgrounds, and they want to feel that you as a business have representation for them. You can represent them in whatever way you need to, so you understand their needs. So whilst you can't employ everybody, and I often say this is not about Noah's Ark, where we have to have two of every person on the boat. It's about creating trust. People need to trust that you are thinking about them and representing them. And that can be, as you mentioned, focus groups, customer groups, surveys, listening activities. D&I is as much about listening as it's about talking. In fact, it's probably more about listening. Inclusive leadership is most definitely around listening. So recognizing that you need to hear voices, you need to hear lived experience, you need to understand where it's working, where it's not working. You have to understand the concerns. So if you speak from a position of privilege, maybe a straight white lens, you may be not hearing the queer black lens, or with a disability, understanding the challenges they face. If you like, the social and structural societal inequities that are inherent all around us, that create barriers for people to even get into the start lane, let alone actually compete. So recognizing that when maybe in talent acquisition, many people from minority or marginalized communities don't even know that role exists or the opportunity exists, because their networks aren't such that they become aware of it. So how can you reach into those communities and hear those voices and make this opportunity available? So I'm not saying that representation and trust can occur where you don't have people from various communities involved, because clearly an all-white company there's going to be a low trust of people from black, brown, people of color. So we need to make sure that we are listening to those voices and have that representation, because there is really no excuse for any organization to hire a monoculture. There's no excuse. There's plenty of opportunity, plenty of people out there that, if they don't have necessarily the exact skills, can be retrained, can be accelerated into a role. But it's about having that, again, conscious inclusion. We need to consciously think about who our talent pool is, what the representation of our organization is, what our client base is, what our locale, the demographic of the locale we represent. So all those things. And it's very easy to say, I've had many organizations say this, well, we come from a very largely working class white area in the northwest of England or northeast of England. And so we don't have many black people. And I say, well, hang on a minute, you're saying that there aren't any people of color in your locale. So, well, there are, but there aren't many. It's like, well, okay, but if you just need to reach harder and smarter rather than say they don't exist. Maybe you can offer relocation packages. Maybe you can broaden the search. But to give up and say it's too difficult implies that you're not, again, consciously including. You're not consciously going out there to market and trying to remove the barriers to the people applying, looking at why people aren't applying. Maybe reaching out to the communities of people you're trying to seek and asking them, why aren't you interested? And they go, well, I've been to your website. it's all white faces. You all look the same. And why would I get a chance to work for a legal firm like yours? Because I wouldn't stand a chance. So if you like, often what happens is these limiting beliefs kick in. So we need to sort of overcome those. So understanding the mindset of people who come from underrepresented communities is the key as well.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult for anybody if they don't have role models and you can't be what you can't see. So as you say, if you look in and say, well, there isn't anybody that looks or feels like me, then you're less likely to engage with that organisation. But it is a challenge, I think, that a lot of businesses are tackling, and also how to then have inclusive practices. Can you obviously interact with lots of different businesses and lots of different sectors. Can you perhaps tell me about some of the more creative initiatives that people have embarked on in their inclusion journey?
What I would say is you don't need to be exotic to attract people who you're not attracting, because there's this belief, well, we've got to be sexy, or we've got to change our appeal, we've got to dress up differently, dress up our organization to be more appealing. I think really it's about being open, honest, and authentic about who you are. It's very reasonable to say, look, we're here. We recognize that we're not representative. We recognize that we should have done better years ago. And what we're doing is we're going to be accountable and say right here, right now, that this is our journey. This is where we want to be. We want to see representation by 2025, by 2030, whatever it may be, to broaden our demographic, to meet the demographic of our locale, to meet the demographic of our customer base, so that we are truly becoming more representative. So that's an accountability statement. And then publishing how that journey looks. So I think we've got to be careful here. We don't do these kind of gimmicks, and that's not what we're about. So I think what I've seen people do is use TikTok as a platform, video hiring, video job kind of adverts on TikTok, on Snapchat, create Snapchat filters to get your brand out there. Maybe doing workshops or meet the employer events in shopping centres or places where people go. Have listening opportunities where you're actually understanding clients. I don't know the specific demographic of where your organisation is based, but I'm sure there are locations where people go in their day-to-day lives. You could create a pop-up stand somewhere in collaboration. I know there are other solicitors firms, which I won't mention, that used to have pop-ups in WH Smith, for example, because again, that's tackling people where they go anyway, creating that brand association with every day, not being aloof or out of touch. So I think that's maybe volunteering or getting involved with community groups for faith or community centres, becoming non-exec directors or volunteers at food banks, other places. So again, you don't become this privileged person trying to be benevolent. You are embedding yourself into the community and building that trust. And I think that's where it comes, where people associate your brand with a brand that's trusted in the community, and they start seeing that you're doing things not just for tokenistic, egotistical or driven for the wrong reasons. They actually see that authenticity of being part of the community. I think that can go a long way, along with other things. I also think that when you're looking at maybe your social media marketing as a brand, and it's about making sure that it follows all year round. It's not just, well, we're going to do a recruitment campaign. Let's put some stuff out now. We'll take some new photographs. We'll get some different people in our organisation to smile at the camera, or we haven't got a black person. Quick, who knows a black person we could put on our website today? It's making sure that you have that continual thread running through your social media, your brand values, your website, your social media posting. What charities do you support? What initiatives are you supporting? So again, when I get the opportunity to apply, I'm thinking, okay, who are you? Who are you? I Google you, I type you into LinkedIn, I go onto Facebook, I go onto Twitter, wherever I may go. I'm starting to do a bit of research. Go, well, actually, yeah, this company is doing a lot. They sponsored a food bank last year. They got involved with the homelessness project. They got involved with a homeless crisis here. They got involved with Black History Month, and they were doing this, that, and the other. And we got some authentic voices here. So I think that's what I would say is the approach, this continual embedded brand, if you like, is part of your DNA and ethos and your culture. So we go back to culture again. So it's part of who you are. And then what will happen is, where you do have people from underrepresented communities already work for you, they'll be more willing to share their stories. They'll be more willing to maybe push their out to their network, your jobs adverts, your requirements. They'd be more willing to share. But if they don't trust you, they're going, well, actually, I wouldn't want my friends to work here. Would you want your son and daughter to work in your organization? If the answer's maybe not really. Do you want your best friend to work? Well, no, not really. I wouldn't really. So you've got to try and get that feeling across where everybody is passionate about the organization and they want to recommend you, because that's we know that people buy from people. People will take recommendations from other people around what a great place you are to work for.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one of the most powerful things I think is allyship, and getting people who do have privilege that you've talked about there to amplify the voices of those who don't. But that can be quite a challenge to get people, A, to see that they are in a privileged position, but B, then to do something about that and to use that position for good. What recommendations would you have for creating strong allyship programs within businesses?
I think when we talk about privilege, people sometimes see that as a kind of a dirty word, and sometimes they recoil and go, I'm not privileged. I haven't had it easy. And I think the first thing to do is recognize that no one's had it easy. Everyone's had a tough life. Everyone's grown up and had to fight through school and fight through university. And we've all had student loans. We've all had failed this and relationship problems and money problems. Some of us are dyslexic, and some of us are overweight, and some of us have other challenges. But privilege is about what you haven't had to go through because of who you are. So because you have white skin, because you are male, because you are straight, you haven't had to face some of the social struggles in society that disadvantages people who are a woman, who are gay, who are black. So it's recognizing what you don't have to go through because of who you are. And that's the thing about privilege, to make sure that people are aware it's not a bad thing to have privilege. It's recognizing the privileges you hold and how you can do something about that. So in terms of allyship, it's recognizing those privileges you have, recognizing how you can educate yourself on the struggles, the challenges, the inequities that other people face, and then working out by listening to the people from those communities, how you can help, how you can amplify. Not about muscling in and taking over and mansplaining or taking over and telling black people how they should be more white or anything like that. It's about listening to the challenges they face and then helping them break down the barriers. So we have to engage people with privilege to make that change. We have to persuade the people with privilege to open the door, to make the changes and to allow us in. So when we're having conversations around gender equality, racial equality, removing ableism and creating accessible workplaces, we need people who are able-bodied. We need people who are white. We need people who are men to make those changes, because without them listening, without them hearing, all that happens is we sit in an echo chamber telling our stories to each other, which we know. Yes, it's good therapy and good self-help, but change never occurs. So it's about being, as an ally, being involved with those conversations, saying, okay, what do you want me to do now? What can I do for you? How can I extend my privilege, if you like, to make a change for you? And that's why I think the value of an ally is, the value of people who hold that privilege is listening and taking action, not trying to muscle in and center yourself in that.
And your business is called See Change Happen. If we just talk a little bit about the business, where did that come from?
Well, when I first started my business, I called it Continuum Consulting Services Limited. Continuum being this ever-changing sort of situation from one to another, every so slightly modified. So that's where Continuum came from. But it didn't really resonate in terms of an inclusion practice. It was more around a trans awareness practice at the time. So I was evolving in this continuum from one to another. That's how I describe myself. See Change Happen, I was sat in the audience of a motivational speaker friend of mine. Just as you do, the motivational speaker was talking and I was drifting off, feeling motivated in my head. And, in these moments, Gandhi pops into your head, be the change you want to see. And I already had a mantra of smile, engage, and educate. So I'd always say, as someone who wants to bring change, if you go in angry, you go in with a frown, you go in beating people with a stick, the first thing to do is pull the drawbridge up and step backwards. So I found that if I was smiling and happy with people, having a conversation, I could bring change and educate once they were receptive. So SEE, smile, engage, and educate, was where I saw it. So see and change happen sort of somehow popped together in my head. A logo of an eye came up in my head, which I Googled on as I sat in the audience on my phone, downloaded an image from Adobe stock and registered the website. And the next day I had the website set up and a website design. Let's say it literally came when I sat in this chair in someone else's motivational talk. And I even went to a networking event that evening after the talk had finished and did a pitch at See Change Happen. And I did a 1-minute talk on it. It was it came from there.
So it was all inside you there, just waiting to come out at some point by the sounds of things.
It was just this inspiration. Yeah, the planets aligned and it popped out. Yeah.
So, Joanne, question for you. In 5 words, how do you find working with your wife?
In 5 words. A truly amazing experience together.
Oh, that's brilliant. My answer would not be the same as that. I don't think I would ever want to work with my other half, but I think, it says it's testimony to you and the relationship that you've got to be able to do that. That's brilliant.
We did work together when I ran an IT company. We were working together turn of the century. Sounds like a long time ago. Yeah, 2000, 2003, 2004, something like that. We were working together. The business didn't succeed. I ended up merging with another company. She ended up going into employment with another organization and we kind of drifted apart. But she was working for a company which I think we could describe as being not culture rich in terms of its employee experience. And a year ago, we got to the point where she was finding it really hard to work there. It was just she just came home every day almost in tears. She felt bullied. She felt disrespected. Her mum was going through a period where she needed her support. They made it really awkward to have a conversation around flexible working, part-time working. She wanted to take 1 day a week off and change her contract. And they basically just threw ACAS letters at her. It was kind of really quite disappointing. And rather than saying, just sit down and have a chat, they just said, fill this ACAS form in as fact find. And she just couldn't handle it. And then she had a final straw event and effectively resigned on the spot, stated constructive dismissal, and went off sick for a month. And then she joined me. So the past year and a bit, she's found herself. She's feels more empowered. She's all the confidence that she'd lost over the last 10 years. She's starting to rebuild. And unfortunately, her mum passed away 2 weeks ago, but she's been able to have the time over the last 3 months to be with her father and her mother and the rest of our family that she could never have done had she been employed. So it also means that we're actually aligned in the same direction. It's an inclusion and belonging business and promoting positive people experiences, I said at the beginning. So she feels this passion as well. So it's not like it's my passion only. She's worked for organizations where she's felt a lack of employee experience. And now she's talking about it. She feels this is her calling. So I think working together, she's not working for me. We're working together, and that's the important difference.
And outside of day-to-day work, what do you and your wife do to have fun and relax, chill out?
Outside of day-to-day, yeah, we've got one of these unlimited cinema cards. So we go to the cinema as often as we can. So on a good week, we can go 3 or 4 times. I mean, we've even spent sort of all day Saturday, 4 or 5 films in a row sometimes if we're trying to catch up.
Wow, that's dedication.
I've got a convertible Mercedes and we like just going somewhere, putting the roof down and parking up, having a coffee, just finding a happy space. We've got a few places we like to go, just take a bit of cake and a bit of coffee, roof down. Marie will read a book, I'll maybe check some emails or something, or do what I do, and just find that happy place. We like spending time with our children. And we quite like just watching a bit of telly and chilling out and just go for a mooch. So yeah, we're quite a happy place together. We laugh and joke. Yeah, we do laugh and joke a lot together.
That's good. I mean, everybody needs their happy place, don't they?
Mm.
At the moment, we're in a place that I find really difficult to deal with transphobia. I have trans friends and colleagues who are having a horrendous time at the moment, and through all of that, face some pretty horrendous abuse online. You deal with people in such a empathetic way. How do you manage to deal with things so calmly when all around you is madness?
I'm a great believer. As a book, Rutger Bregman, he wrote this book called Humankind. He also wrote another one called Utopia for Realists. And he kind of sings to me in a way that that resonated. And one thing Rutger says is that the human species as such is inherently good. It's inherently good. And as a species, we are inherently collaborators and team players. And I really resonate with that. I read the book last year, I think it was, and I'd already had that thought in my head. And I also subscribe to the mantra that people aren't right or wrong. They just have a different perspective on things. And that perspective comes from our lived experience, our race, faith, ethnicity, all the things that we grow up with from the point we're born. So our perspectives are shaped by our lives. So we don't have to agree. And often I don't agree with people and people don't agree with me. But if we could share our perspective about why we think something or why we believe something, then I don't have to agree with you, but I can understand why you think something. I don't have to vote the same way as you. You may have a different view of who the best candidate in an election is. I have my view for reasons I don't need to explain, but I just go, yeah, I don't agree with you. So we can vote for different people and we don't have to disagree with it. But I understand why you may want to vote for somebody. So when we talk about the trans, I think it's the trans debate. What a crass phrase that is. Who wants to be debated? Who wants their existence debated? I don't want to demonize somebody else. I don't want to dehumanize somebody else. They may want to demonize or dehumanize me. I don't want to go low. I want to go high. I want to actually say, look, I want to speak from the I want to speak from my perspective. I want to rehumanize myself, undemonize, if that's a word. So I want to talk about me, the human, me, the partner with my wife, me, the parent, me, the productive business entrepreneur, me, the person that does all the things I do. I don't want to get into debates around trans people, these myths and labels we're associated with. Suddenly, trans and rapists are now in the same sentence. Trans and paedophile in the same sentence. Trans and cheat and sport are the same. Suddenly, these words are now being linked in for political purposes, for whatever, or to sell newspapers or clicks or divide people to be used as a football. I don't want to engage in those debates. I want to say, this is me, see me for who I am, see other trans people for who they are. And let's not get involved in this down in the mud kind of argument here. This is, no one's going to win those arguments. We're always going to, if we sit polarized at opposite ends of the table, all we're going to do is disagree. But if we can get into the middle and say, well, I understand that we need to have sensible debates around medical support for people who are trans, young people who are trans. We clearly say that the gender identity services in this country are inadequate, underfunded, and not fit for purpose. I think we can all agree with that, whatever side of the fence you're on. So let's start thinking about what the destination looks like. Well-funded gender support services for all people that don't necessarily force people into a decision. They're timely, so their mental health isn't suffering. We're not getting in a queue that we've waited 5 years for. And by the time we get to the end of the 5 years, we feel like we have to make a decision, whether we're ready or not. So, but if I can access healthcare at the primary level, at GP surgery, I can then get support. I can talk to people. The pressure's taken off. My mental health will improve. And then when I'm looking to change my legal gender through Gender Recognition Act, Gender Recognition Certificate, it's not an elongated process that is almost unachievable. I can do this process within a year, within 2 years, whatever it may be. So a lot of the arguments around Gender Recognition Act, keeping the medical element in it, the psychologists, psychiatrists in it. It would be great. I know that doesn't work for everybody. For me, I kind of go, well, okay, if I can see one next week and I can get it sorted, it doesn't bother me then. I can tick that box without any hurdle. So I think removing some of the barriers that are causing these challenges for trans people is the core. Then we can start moving on to bigger issues like how do we change the view in society around trans people so we're not more likely to have mental health concerns, not more likely to be jobless, not more likely to be homeless, not more likely to have families breaking down, not having access to our children, splitting families up. Because a lot of that comes from stigma. A lot of that comes from people's lack of willingness to employ, engage, or even keep as part of the family, because there's so much societal noise around being anti-trans that it's hard to win. I know my wife, when I transitioned 6.5 years ago, was immensely worried about the stigma it would have on her and our family and my daughter and our son. It was more about how they're going to tell their friends and what their friends would think of them than it was about me. So it's almost like this stigma by proxy, this discrimination by proxy, because that's what society is telling people. Yeah, trans people are weird, trans people are this, trans people are the other. Of course, if you're married to a trans person, you're going to be going, oh, hang on a minute. Everyone's going to be thinking I'm weird if I stick by you. So if we can start changing the narrative and resolving the core problems, which is access to medical support, access to mental health services, joblessness, homelessness, and just creating environments where trans people can succeed without being dehumanized and demonized, that's what we're going to do. Then we can have debates around sport and prisons and where the best place is. But very often what we're doing is we're confusing an avatar that people have in their heads of this big, burly, bearded man with lipstick on, taking part with small 4'11" young women. And it seems unfair because that's the picture that the press are giving us. But the reality is many young trans people who transition pre-puberty or around puberty develop very similar features to that of people who are assigned female or assigned male at birth. By preventing them accessing blockers or access to pathways in their younger life, we're dooming them, if you like, to a future where they go through puberty and then their physical features develop in a way that is incongruent with who they are.
Yeah, and for me, it's reminiscent of the sort of late 80s, early 90s, where gay people were stigmatized, particularly coming out of the AIDS epidemic, and bisexual people were tagged as being the spreaders of the virus and all of that sort of stuff. But over time, I'm hopeful. I find it very difficult because it resonates absolutely with that time and how awful that time was. But I try, taking a lead from you, focus on the positives. We have moved substantially in terms of attitudes to gay people and bisexual people. And I'm hopeful that the same journey, awful though it is at the moment, we will come out through that common ground and through the positive things that you've talked around. We will be able to, as a society, move forwards in a sensible way. I really do hope that is the future.
Yeah, I was at a dinner on Friday, and in my past I was national president.
I saw this. Yes. Yeah, this is brilliant.
I was national president of the National Association of Round Tables. Round Table was a man's club formed in 1927 in Norwich, and I was national president in 2008, 2009. The club had about 800 or 900 clubs in the UK, 10,000 members when I was national president. And when I transitioned, about 4 or 5 years after I left the club, the people who I was close friends with from that time, there was a definite shift away from me, like a leaning back, like a confusion. I was almost accused of trying to change Round Table into a dual gender club from the inside. It's like, no, I just don't want to lose all my friends, if that's okay with you. I was a bit confused. I didn't have many female friends at the time that were close, but I had lots of male friends, and I was looking for that camaraderie, that sense of belonging still. And every year there's reunion dinners and anniversaries here, there, and the other. So on Friday there was an annual past area chair event in near Portsmouth, where I live. And I've been going to these for the best part of 20 years and in my male life. And I was kind of apprehensive about, did I want to go? Did I want to be the only woman in a room of men? Because that's quite tough, isn't it? To be the only woman in a room of men. Have everyone look at me, still scratching their head going, I can't figure this one out. And just whether I would be able to tolerate the banter and the male humor and everything like that. Just whether I was going to go, but why was I going? This is a man's club. Why am I going to a man's club for? So all these things were pinging around in my head. And a lot of it was I was internalizing it, rejecting myself, telling myself all these stories. And I had a really good time. And the thing that showed me that the world's moved on in the last 6 years is one of my best friends. I found out the other week that his daughter, that I knew younger, was trans. He has a trans daughter now. And we didn't talk about it. I mean, I didn't go into the details. So, wow, fantastic, because it's not a conversation that you want to have about trans people. Trans people don't want to talk about themselves all the time, or the fact someone else is trans. So so he said that he had a trans daughter. And then as I was driving one of the other friends home to the ferry terminal to get to the Isle of Wight, he said, yeah, my daughter is questioning non-binary. And I went, wow. So I had a conversation with two people that night who told a lived experience of a family member, a child of theirs. And that would never have happened 6 years ago. And the other thing I noticed is when I run training courses, I ran a session for a company the other day, and two people on that call sort of at the Q&A session said, well, I'm a mother to a daughter, daughter. Didn't know how to describe this person. And I'm really struggling. Can you help give me some tips on how to be a good mum to my trans daughter? So I ended up having that conversation. Then somebody else spoke up and said, yeah, my daughter's, or my son is trans, and they were telling their story. So often when I go out and about into companies, into organizations, it's more often than not, someone will come up to me and just say that their daughter, their son, their trans, their husband, whatever, a family member or a close friend is trans, and do I have any advice or on pronouns and getting it right? So I've noticed that shift over the last 5 or 6 years, where most people know somebody or have a connection to somebody. The six degrees of separation. I think from a trans perspective, it's maybe 1 or 2 degrees of separation. You've either got someone close to you, or you know someone who has a trans person in their life. And I think that's a real change. And people are proud to talk about it now, because as you said earlier, you can't beat what you can't see. Unless we've got positive role models in society, in business, just being them, you have all this worry about how your child is going to grow up into this hostile world. So you need to see that representation. And I don't want to claim any sort of status here, but I'm proud to be me and to be visible, and for people to come up, have these conversations, and just for me existing, and I'm changing the world. It's so moving sometimes, the stories I hear.
That's a really fitting place to sort of draw it to a close, I think. You are an inspiration and a role model to lots of people, not just trans people. Your attitude and the way that you approach business is really refreshing. I'm in a sector that's very traditional. At Square One Law, we try to break the mold a bit, try to do things differently, and finding role models like yourself who are really doing things differently, challenging the norms and helping to move the conversations on, is really helpful to me as a leader in business as well. So thank you. Thanks for your time today, and we'll speak soon. Thank you for listening to Fear Less, Do More. All of our guests come from a diverse range of backgrounds, but they all share a common drive to face their fears, take action, and create meaningful impact. If you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast, please follow us, Square One Law, on Instagram and LinkedIn, and share the content with your friends, family, and networks. Thank you, and see you again on our next episode.